Good morning and greetings to all. Under the auspices of the history wing, Directorate of Business Education, Annamalai University, and 1 week faculty development program has been organized. The program is to be commenced now. It's a pleasure to me to welcome Professor Rajasekhar, Directorate of Business Education, Annamalai University, Professor Sivadasan, Professor of History, University of Calicut, Kerala, and all the participants. Now I invite Professor Rajasekhar, Directorate of Distance Education, Annamalai University, to inaugurate the event.
The Annamalai University Directorate of Business Education Institute is organizing 1 week national level online faculty development program for university college history teachers on the topic effective history teaching and research paper publishing. I congratulate the organizing secretary and Ramchandran for the endless efforts to bring this FDP, and no doubt that this FDP will bring a good record to the staff members. Dear participants, make use of this FDP, which not only covers history but also interdisciplinary topics, and there are stalwarts not only from history department but also from many departments are coming here and they are giving here to know about that this will encourage the knowledge of the participants and this will bring you in our endeavor, in your future endeavor. I wish you all the success. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to inaugurate this function. Best wishes. Thank you.
Now I am happy to introduce Professor Sivadasan, Professor of History, University of Calicut, Kerala, who is going to handle the first session of the first day. He has specialized on modern Indian history, urban studies. Presently, he holds a number of positions, including General Secretary, South Indian History Congress, Director, IQAC, University of Calicut, Kerala, Member, Indian Historical Records Commission, New Delhi, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Social Sciences, Sri Sankaracharya University, Kaladi, Kerala. And apart from that, he had been the Controller of Examination, University of Calicut, Member Syndicate, University of Calicut. He has published more than 50 research papers and a book on local history of Kerala. At the outset, he is a humble teacher and an honest historian. Now I request Professor Sivadasan to handle the session.
Hello, good morning all. Am I audible to all?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I want to share my PowerPoint.
Now you can share, sir.
Okay, right. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Visible?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Okay. So, shall I start?
Yes, sir. You can start, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, all. At the very outset, let me thank Annamalai University, DDE, and Professor Shankari and faculty members of the university and all other assembled in this webinar session for giving me a chance to share my views connected with making or turning our classroom into an interesting zone of or an activity zone in the discipline of history. As all of you know, today it is a world controlled by technology and the disciplines associated with science and technology. So all of us are alarmed about, are thinking about the crisis of humanities and other disciplines in social sciences in this techno world. But if we are ready to transform our discipline into a subject fit to handle the problems faced by humanity today, we will be in a position to transform our classrooms into an interesting zone of activity of students, and also turn our subject into an employment oriented subject, and also a subject which is capable of handling problems faced by humanity today. This is the most important goal and purpose of teaching history, because history teachers always look at the past from the present. So there is a dialogue between the present and the past, where the historian and the audience stands in the present, and they are communicating with the past. So the past is invited to better the present and the future. When we communicate with the past, we collect experiences that the people lived in the past came across in their daily life, and we share that experience to enable the present generation to cross the difficulties that stand in front of them, making disturbances to the smooth journey of their everyday life. So like science, like technology, we are teaching a discipline which is connected with the present day life and future of the society. And this is the most important feature of our discipline, history. So we cannot move away from the present. The present is the most important thing when we handle history in the classroom and also in the research hall. It is in this backdrop the Annamalai University DDE Center selected the teaching of history in the classroom and possibilities of making it into an activity zone connected with the problems of the present. So when organizers of the conference told me to frame a topic to get it delivered in the webinar, I selected a topic which focus upon how to make our history classroom interesting today. We have a lot of books connected with the discipline of history and its methodology, but books debating the issue of turning our classroom, turning our research activity in history into an interesting activity are very rare. So naturally, this results in making our classes and research activity boring, and also the results not fit for solving the problems faced by humanity today. So we do the activity just to get our salary, or we do the activity without finding its effect that it creates upon the audience and the students and the listeners and viewers of the program. So let us seriously think about how to make our classroom and research activity very interesting. Technology that has emerged as an important tool of teaching today has become a blessing to us to change the structure of history classroom. We have a lot of equipments, we have now projectors and many other digital devices, computers, internet, video machines, etc., to collect data, to bring things which are remaining in faraway places into the classroom, and assembling all those evidences and observations of different scholars, materials available in faraway libraries and repositories into the classroom, etc., so that we can make our classroom live, which was not possible in the past. But in spite of all these facilities, we have failed. Generally, we have failed in bringing all these things to make our classroom into an activity zone. We are assembling today in the midst of a great crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. It is in this crisis, we began to explore possibilities of conducting webinars, making use of Google Meets and Zoom meetings, etc. So out of compulsion, we are endeavoring to make use of all these facilities to compensate the inability to go to schools and colleges. So even history students and history teachers and researchers are widely using all these facilities, which was present in front of us many years ago, but we were not ready to make use of all these facilities. But fortunately, no, one blessing that has emerged in the midst of this crisis is our compulsion, our interest in making use of these facilities, technology to compensate the inabilities of the hard difficulties that has become a reality because of the COVID-19 crisis. There are certain books which tell you how to make classroom teaching, classroom activity and research activity very interesting in the discipline of history. We are living in the age of interdisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity. And if you observe, all these facilities are very helpful to turn our discipline more connected with our daily life. See, our life is a complicated thing. In a family, we manage a lot of things, but in a classroom, in a school and a syllabus, we study the family by dividing it into different zones of subject. For example, history. History is integrated to our daily life. We have our own historical consciousness, and every man, even without going to school and colleges, creates his own historical consciousness, and that is very necessary, inseparable in moving his life, his mother, his father, his association with his family, his country, and tools and techniques of daily life, etc. So many things are there. History is very essential to keep life going on without any hindrance. So in a family, we use psychology to see things, to manage things. We have our own economics, we have our own physics, we have our own medicines, our own history and our own literature, etc. Amusements, cultural activities, all these things are integrated together to form our everyday life or daily life. But in a school, we study all these things in separate disciplines. So that makes it more complicated. In order to cross that problem, today scholars and experts say that we have to move to interdisciplinarity to make all these school subjects, college subjects, research subjects more close to our daily day-to-day problems, so that we will be in a position to connect our life, real life, with research issues and teaching subjects, so that students will get more excited when they see their problems discussed in the classroom, their history discussed in the classroom. When they see faces similar to them, when they see issues that are in front of them debated in the classroom, they make our research, our study more interesting, and they see that these are very essential to solve issues that is confronted by their family, by this individual, by their village, by their country, etc. So the gap between reality and the classroom text is an important issue, which is to be shortened, which is to be filled by using interdisciplinarity as a methodology. So historians have to use techniques and research outputs available in botany, in physics, in chemistry, in literature, in geography, in geology, then sociology, anthropology, etc., to bring all disciplines together and to debate issues that we confront in our daily life. Let us bring all these together to make history our daily life as the basis, the backdrop of all problems in the classroom, so that our history classroom also can be turned into an interesting zone of activity. Okay. So I shall show you some books which are very essential to turn our classroom into an interesting place. First one is teaching history in the digital classroom. No, digital tool is an important thing. How to use digital tools in the history classroom.
Sir,
These
slideshow, sir. F5, press F5, sir. Slideshow.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. So making use of digital tools in the classroom will help us to use technology in modernizing our history teaching. Now, this is very important to transform our research activity also. This book is available through online. So I request all of you to collect this book and make use of this book to make our history teaching in the history classroom interesting. Teaching history in the digital classroom. Antonio Cando and Wilson G. Warren has written this, and this is very essential to transform our college history classrooms and also school history classrooms. Then we have another book which is also available. It is a recent book to make use of online teaching to teach history. So this online teaching is the complete thing of all. It cannot give you the human face and of teaching a social science discipline. But periods like this, COVID-19, necessitates, it compels us to use online facility to teach history. So here we can see podcasts, other video formats, making use of PowerPoints, then learning management systems, etc. to and make use of all these facilities to modernize history teaching today. This is written by John F. Lyons, Teaching History Online. Then we have a book on digital libraries, and this is available in India, published by an Indian library expert, and where you can see how documents can be preserved, and it also debates what is archiving, and that can be how it can be modernized in the time of technology, because today we preserve data not in the form of papers. So we preserve data in the form of digital things. So which also needs a relook at the problem from the library point of view. So preservation of history, I mean documents and books and other papers, archival data, etc. is very important. How to keep all these things in the digital form is also very important today. So if we keep all these things in digital form, that we can preserve it for a longer period, and also we can select it in an easy manner and make use of all these things in the history classroom in the form of videos and PowerPoints. So I shall tell you how all this becomes beneficial in making history teaching effective in the digital classroom. Then we have a lot of books today to tell you what is the importance of moving away from classroom to the field to make his teaching and research in history interesting. This is a very good book on teaching history beyond the classroom. Usually when we teach history, we generally use the text as a basic document. I mean the book, the textbook as the primary document to teach history. When I was doing my school education, there was a teacher responsible for teaching social science, in which history was included. And he was coming to the classroom with a textbook prescribed by the government, and he turns a particular page and tells students to turn that page, and he starts reading the paragraph. And this was the way in which he taught history in my school classroom. And actually, a large number of students began to dislike history discipline because of the way in which that teacher was teaching history. But when you turn this into an activity, history teaching into an activity, closely related with his village, his life, people like him. So he identifies that it is his history, it is his problem, so that it becomes interesting. So we have to go beyond the boundaries set by conventions. So in order to break traditions of history teaching, we have to see what are the newer possibilities emerge in the field regarding history teaching. This is a very good book which tell you how to make use of a photograph, how to make use of an image, how to make use of sound clips, how to make use of video clips, etc. in teaching history. This book is debated all these things from the theoretical perspective, which will help you to modernize history teaching, and also it will produce students interested in scientific skills, because the making use of science in history teaching is very important, because our discipline is a scientific discipline, because we depend upon true evidences, and we depend upon discussing and debating problems of humanity, his psychology, his existence, his challenges, so that we make man powerful. So in order to make him empowered, in order to make him confident to face challenges, we have to teach him history in that way. So this is a very important book, History Beyond the Text. Let us pass on to the subject chosen for debate today. So in the traditional classroom, all of you are aware that we are not making our subject, our teaching and learning process productive. Students know, because of the service of some expert teachers, some students know decides to learn history in their higher classes, but majority of students abandon history because of the lack of interest generated in the classroom. Some students, brilliant students, click to the view that they remain to their attitude that they want to learn history, even though the family compels them to take medicine and science to have a better earning in their future. But some students, in spite of all these compulsions, tell their parents and teachers that I want to teach, I want to learn history in my higher classes and become a good historian. But the number of that kind of people are very few today. So what is the remedy to turn our history classroom more interesting and more valuable to the community and the student group today? And in my opinion, the most important remedy available to us is bring research activity in the classroom. Doing research is a remedy to turn the history classroom into a live area of interesting activity, human activity. No, by doing research, it doesn't mean history students in the classroom, in the college class and the university class or school class become good researchers, but we instill him the basic qualities of a researcher, so that students keeps that scientific skill in his life and begin to ask questions about the things that he see in before his eyes in his daily life. So enabling him to ask questions and collect evidences and reaching conclusions are the three important activity involved in research work. So when you instill these three qualities in a student, he naturally becomes very active in history classroom. He becomes interested in history learning. So doing research is an important remedy to transform our history classroom, to make it more interesting. What we do in conventional and traditional classroom, we give assignments to students, and they go to home and they collect library books and refer all these things and write down notes. So they bring their assignments. In many general cases, many students bring older assignments, copying down assignments prepared by previous students, or they copy down what is known, what is available in the text, etc., without understanding what was the problem given to them. So these kinds of activity make students less confident, less interesting in the discipline of history. So they seek asylum in other disciplines, literature, science, engineering, technology, etc. But when you turn all these students into research-oriented outlook, so they remain in our discipline, and they take interest in separate special areas of history discipline, and they get expertise, advice, they make inquiry, so that they can select that area in their higher classroom and research activity. Suppose students taking interest in archaeology and taking an area in archaeology as his area of interest, like paleobotany, he takes interest and he go to botany expert and collect information and ideas from him and mix botanical knowledge with history discipline to make his archaeology study effective. No, that kind of developments appear when we give that kind of orientation in the classroom only. So we have to make effort to change the perspective of history classroom by bringing out certain changes, for which we have to turn the classroom into a research activity. So in developed countries, now they do this kind of activity even in the school classrooms, so that people, students, small students go to the field and collect information, and learning has become more student oriented, not teacher oriented. Our classrooms are now to an extent teacher oriented. It is a teacher who decides what is to be taught, what and in what way it is to be taught. In that way, we have to transform this to make the student as a central figure of history teaching, and make him competent to ask questions, compel him to ask questions, so that he himself finds answers, he seeks answers from other sources. So newer ideas generates because of that activity. Now, the main purpose, the chief purpose of learning is creating knowledge. So in order to create knowledge, some sort of research activity is required. Or we do good research in higher classes, but if you compel students to ask questions, he identifies so many problems available around us in the society living around us. So those things are to be answered, and this is real education. Okay, so in order to which we have to bring some sort of research activity in the history classroom. Give them good assignments, and students go in their own to different sources and collect data and present that idea, their conclusion in the classroom. Naturally, it becomes beneficial to his teacher also. So because it becomes a classroom, becomes a university, a place where new knowledge is created. You can publish all these things even in collective form, even in good publications. The society will surely appreciate this kind of activity. So let us train students in making inquiry and learning fast in that way, in the modern way. So in short, we can see 4 important things are required in classroom teaching. Even though certain chapters are prescribed for classroom teaching in a stipulated period, turn the teaching of these given topics into research activities. Connect all these topics with the daily life of the student, the society in which he is living. Connect them with the knowledge they already know. Connect them with the phases that he is familiar with. So when we teach, for example, First World War, students are now explained the history of Europe and incidents associated with the First World War, which are not familiar to the student living in Kerala and Tamil Nadu or in any of the other villages in India. But if you teach the experiences of humanity lived in India during the time of First World War, begin with that what we already know. In a village where sometimes some documents will be available telling the participation of that villagers as soldiers in the First World War. So that connect that thing and begin the problem from already what we know, and also tell how the British government propagated their victory in 1918 in the First World War. I came to know that the British had deployed drum beaters to inform the public that the British country had won in the First World War. This was the way in which they communicated governmental decisions and the wishes of the government among the villagers by drum beating. In old documents, you can see tom-tom beat, which was the method through which they communicated the governmental decisions to the people. So after the end of First World War, the British government deployed paid servants to do this tom-tom beat and to tell the people that the war is over and Britain has won the war. So in that way, we bring information that is familiar to us, that is known to us, and teach that discipline. And don't go miles far away, which is not familiar to the teacher and student, to teach a discipline. So that our teaching become an interesting activity. So as I told earlier, we compel students, we make eligible students asking questions. Then the student is told to collect information regarding that question, and he analyzes those information collected and draw conclusions and present his findings. And even in PhD course, now this is the way in which we do a PhD work. We find out a problem, we frame questions, then we go to repositories and the field, we collect data, then we analyze the data collected, draw conclusions, and we present it in a thesis or a research paper. So like this activity, its miniature form is to be introduced in the classroom so that activity can be associated with the history teaching in the history classroom. So the first thing that we have to do to change our history classroom is creating interest. This is called imaginative entry into the history classroom. How to create interest, how to introduce the topic to the student is very important. It is the first introduction that determines the destiny of the presentation. So in order to create interest, as I said earlier, we have to begin with what the student already knows. So let us start instruction with what the student already know, for which we are familiar with the history of families. So we see all students are associated with smaller and bigger families. Surely all these families are associated with history. Not only the elite, but even the subaltern and the middle classes have their own histories. They have their own perspective, their own understanding about the past of the society in which they are living, and also the family in which they are living. So this multiplicity of history is very important. Usually in conventional books and conventional data, we come across only with the history of the elite people and the richer classes. So in those times, only these people were able to preserve data and write down notes, write down diaries, and keep all these documents in safer places for their future and posterity. Or, the poor people had no opportunity to write down all these things, to preserve all these things, or also engage with history when they were struggling hard to face the realities of life. So already known histories, recorded histories, documents and archival data are associated with the history of the richer classes. But we know that the poor and the middle classes had their own history. But this is not visible in historical documents. It is a duty of historian to find out the faces of poor people and the subaltern and the middle classes from the lines written by the richer classes. When we go to the history of Mughal period, we see the royal firmans and documents associated with the palace. But in between the lines, we can see the small faces, black faces of women and ordinary people carrying heavy loads, doing music and preparing carpets, doing paintings, and constructing huge buildings, etc. Those laborers are also integral to the discipline of history. How can we identify those spaces between the lines? By doing critical engagement with the sources, we will be in a position to identify all these people. So in family histories, in history in different forms, in oral form or written form, available in the village, we see the reflection of all activities that happened around us. Now, industrial revolution, world war, economic depression, the problem of gender, slavery, caste, then distancing, untouchability, everything is live in our village, but it is dissimilar to a system that existed in a village located far away. We had our own system. When we teach industrial revolution, we teach industrial revolution in Europe as a system which created benefit for the people in Europe. And we also see those industrial benefits got transported to India by the colonial authorities, and they make use of all these facilities in colonial India by the end of 19th century. We see the introduction of railway system. But you have to see the difference. In Europe, railway was made use to ensure the benefit, the transportation of the people and making their life secure and happy. But in India, the colonial government introduced railway not for the benefit of people. They introduced railway to transport resources from the interior to the port towns, to carry out, to transport all these resources for the benefit of the European people. So the industrial benefit, the industrial revolution is to be taught in 19th century Indian history in a different way. This is called the difference between colonial modernity and Indian modernity. Okay, in India, the industrial revolution took place to benefit colonialism. In Europe, it was beneficial to the people. So there is change of modernity. So when we teach history of industrial revolution, we have to keep in mind the difference between those things. So when you teach a subject in to a students belonging to a remote village, you have to teach them from what are they already knows in their history. So family history is very interesting. We also around us different kinds of artifacts and objects associated with our daily life in the past. For example, toys. Now toys have become different today, but 20 years back, 50 years back, 100 years back, toys were totally different. The local people had manufactured different kinds of toys appropriate to the times of that period. But when we came under the control of colonialism and when we got globalized today, our toys and our imaginations about childhood have become totally different. So students can be taught, collect toys of different periods, ask elders about the toys that they had used during their childhood, and compare that toys with the toys available today. Let us also see, today we spend huge amount of money for the betterment of our children. But in those days, no, we were not able to, our past generation was not able to share that kind of money for the betterment of security of children. So in those days, there was no concept of child dress. Today we in the street see shops exclusively for selling dress of children. But in those days, such shops were not available. So the world has changed. So let us generate what we already know in our history and relate modern disciplines with the history of our village, our family, so that it becomes interesting. Toys, houses, dress, attire, utensils, and when we analyze all these things, we reach in abstract topics like economic life in our village, political attitude of the people in our village, the society that lived in our village, etc., in city, in rural area, in urban area, etc., so that we can go to enter into bigger concepts like material life in our village, everyday life in our village, cultural life, our appropriation of external pressures, resistance to external pressures, etc. So all these subjects are very important in history discipline today, because and sources and documents, evidences associated with making our discipline more scientific are available in our village. By making use of different advantages available in different disciplines, our discipline can be transformed into a good thing. An important thing, object that can create interest in the classroom are visual images. Visual images. I have shown you a book in the beginning called History Beyond the Text. In that book, there is a chapter on how image can be used in a history research hall, in a research in a research activity, in history teaching room. So images are very important because images speaks about lot of things. Images are very important in history classroom. When you show an image, the student learns lot of things surrounding around that village. I can show you, I shall show you some images that tell you what actually had happened in those period. So collection of pictures and images by a history teacher is very important, and use those pictures in appropriate places to generate interest among the students. And today we have, all of us have mobile phones with us. So take photographs that are linked with history teaching and preserve them and make use of in a very strategic manner in different classrooms. When you prepare PowerPoints on different topics in a syllabus, you prepare PowerPoints and add pictures and data that you come across in their daily life with them, and make class every year more effective by making use of these images and objects, photographs, because there is no need, there is no expense in taking photographs. You can take photograph by using your mobile phone, which was not possible in older days. Today we have these digital equipments generally with all people. So make use of those digital equipments to make our classroom interesting. Images and photographs bring wider range of background knowledge than the text and oral discussion. So it makes our classroom more interesting, and students learn lot of things beyond what we say, what we utter in the history classroom. Okay, so images have more capacity to communicate with the students so than text and oral discussions. Students can mark difference between 100 years and the present through images. Show the images of a man who was living in who was wearing an attire 100 years ago, and show a man like us in the classroom. You can see the difference. His hairstyle, his health, his color, no, the things that he wore in the, he uses, he carries in his body are totally different. So why this difference appears in his body, and why this kind of special things? So such questions emerges when we show these kinds of pictures in the classroom. See, this picture show you poverty in India under colonialism. You can see in the deeper sense the impact of that the colonial rule created upon the Indian people. This was a situation in 1890s. This photograph is associated with the 19th century poverty in India. No, there are a lot of texts debating about the poverty, the exploitation, draining of our Indian wealth by the colonial authorities and also capitalists. But they do not tell you this kind of sense. Such research publications cannot communicate you the way in which it created impact upon the Indian man, the ordinary man. Now this picture will tell you the way in which colonialism had turned Indian life through colonial economic exploitation. So photographs are very important today. Digital tools have made opportunity to us to turn our history classroom more interesting by using photographs and images. And all these images are available through textbooks and also history collection, photograph collections. And if you go to archives and other repositories, you can see a lot of images. So take snaps of all these pictures and make use of these pictures in appropriate places of history classroom. Then, like images, in order to create interest among students as an imaginative entry are artifacts. When you make use of artifacts in classroom, carry 1 or 2 artifacts when you teach a particular subject into the classroom and show this thing to students and tell them to name the object and also compel them to find out the period of the object and so that their ability to interpret things can be generated. We ask them questions and collect answers from them and correct them if they commit wrong when they do their reply. So artifacts are most important historical objects, gives more opportunity of learning among students. So we have to stop teaching by making use of written language and oral lectures. Use artifacts like and images to make our classroom more effective. Students develop better ideas by operating objects and seeing artifacts. So carry all these things like a science teacher. He carries all students to the lab, so that we also carry students either to the archives or to a museum to show things in a wider manner. But to a classroom, you can carry some objects. So keep a collection of these objects associated with your specialized area in history discipline and carry those objects to the classroom, so that you can your classroom become fine and good and also effective, beneficial to the students. Students develop better ideas after seeing these objects. Those teachers who practice all these things in history classroom might have experienced the impact it creates upon the students, like that kind of teachers in a good manner, and they keep that relation forever. So such teachers are remembered forever. So make use of your life as a teacher to do all these activities and become a good history researcher and a history teacher by making use of artifacts and images. So students learn beyond what is said in the prescribed text by seeing these objects. They might have seen similar objects. Then students will rise up and understand that I have teacher, I have seen such an object in my home. Tomorrow I shall bring that object to show you. So in that way, it becomes an activity. Okay, students become excited by taking part in such classrooms. See, this picture will show you clay objects identified by the Department of History, University of Calicut, from a nearby village. Now, it tell you in the medieval period, our people were very experts in clay manufacturing. But unfortunately, the people who live in that village today are not at all aware of this technology and skill. It has become totally vanished from that village. But from the soil, we discovered all these objects. There is a skill associated with it, and there was a community associated with this skill, but it has become extinct. So this object will tell you a lot of things. It is speaking to the public in a loud voice about a period in which they had lived. You can see the ornaments they used. You can see different hairstyle. You can see the way in which these clay objects are created. So artifacts are very important to the historian. Okay, it tells you a lot of things to the history scholars, and they they manufactured all these artifacts according to the surroundings in which they lived. Okay, you can tell about the society in which they were living, the environment they were living, people associated with the different aspects of everyday life through these artifacts. So these are very important. So never miss a chance to preserve artifacts by a history teacher, because this would become very useful to us to turn our history classroom very interesting. Similarly, going to the field, going to different houses, now checking old documents is also an important activity. We, along with the students, go to villages, stay in the village and conduct archival activity. So we were in a position to identify a large number of historical documents associated with the life of the people in the village. Actually, this is a remote village and this is a house of a landlord, but their forefathers, their predecessors have kept large number of documents of the 18th and 19th century. Some of them are paper documents that tell you the way in which they responded to the external pressures. Now, legal cases, nationalism, caste question, ownership, and also the family administration and adaptation of technology, purchase of newer vehicle, then the emergence of status, elevation of status, the management of the servants, etc. Lot of things. These are closely associated with the village life. These are closely associated with a life which is known to us, our village. but it has not become a subject of research today. We are doing research about a people who are never in front of us. We are not close to them. Naturally, we artificially studies a problem, and that research output is never becomes useful to the society around us. So we have to end that practice. Come back to our village, come back to our society, come back to our family, and make use of the data available to us to do research for the betterment of our own community, so that research becomes useful to the humanity. Produce that kind of students with that perspective in the history classroom, for which you have to teach students that our history is the most important history than the history of Europe, than the history of China, than the history of Northern India. So we have to come back to our village and teach students about the history of village by doing these kinds of activity. Then how we can create interest by making use of other than images and artifacts. Use variety of topics and tools that can make entry of a topic in the classroom. Go beyond conventional oral and written language. Use literature, use photographs, use physical artifacts. It enables the student to have concrete understanding of the life around them. The life around them. When you read a textbook, a student has to see his face, his father's face, his family problems, his societal problems in the textbook, so that it becomes intimate to him, so that it becomes his problem. So in order to that, we have to connect his life with the text. Okay, when the student gets stimulated by all these, he makes his own inquiry outside the classroom, at home, houses of relatives, by asking questions to father, mother, and elders. Thus, elders in the village, so that appropriate history learning creates learning beyond classroom. So visuals, images are very important. Artifacts are very important. Then traveling beyond classroom is also important, so that it becomes, our classroom becomes an interesting place for students. Then we make students enabled to ask questions. As I said earlier, when you show an object, teach students asking questions. So asking questions is a positive activity. Don't get afraid of questions. No, that is a symptom of interest in students. Exhibit an artifact. In order to teach how to ask questions, you bring an artifact into the classroom and ask students to write about certain questions you raise. Okay, show an object in the history classroom and tell students write answers to the following questions. For example, make up a name for the object that tells its purpose. Show a clay object which is not familiar to the present day younger generation, and tell him to make up a name for the object and tells its purpose. Then tell when you think that this object was used. Ask students to ask when did the people use, to find out the time, and also tell how decided when it, and ask students, how did you find this was used in 19th century? Okay, what is the evidence? How did he reach in that conclusion? Then name the object now we are using today instead of this artifact. Today we use large number of artifacts, machines in our house. But 50 years ago, our past generation were not using this utensil, this instrument. Instead of that, those people were doing a different activity. So find out that activity 50 years ago. Okay, so our classroom becomes a science lab. Our classroom becomes more important than a science which is debating the day-to-day problem. So history becomes an interesting discipline. Then we are going to the second part. We have created interest. We have taught students different things. Now let us go to the second activity. What is that? Turning interest to research questions. Asking research questions is very important. When we ask research questions, it begins with this important thing. What? where, why, when, who, how. So students are unable to generate questions about a problem selected. Okay, when you frame a problem, students are told to raise questions, to frame questions. Generally, even in our PG classes, students have not become qualified to ask questions. So this is a primary quality of a researcher, asking questions. So teach students how to ask questions. Students, we write down certain things in the whiteboard or blackboard. What, where, why, when, who, and how, and frame questions in that way. What happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? When did it happen? Who framed this? How did it take place? Okay, these are very important things. So in historical methodology, a history discipline becomes a science when we ask what, when, how, and why. Okay, why is most important. No document will tell you why, answer to the question why. It is the historian through analysis find out answer to the question why. So tell students to start with these terms, questions. What happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? When did it happen? In that way. So ask students to write 2 questions starting, and also tell students to frame similar questions about the object. It enables students to frame questions. Student may be asked to observe the problem and frame more questions about. They ask it. Sometimes students bring to in the next day certain questions like who did use it? Did anybody use it? And did only rich people use it? In that way. So students becomes creative by framing newer questions beyond the text, beyond the instruction of the teacher. Surely this makes students scientific and skilled in observation. Okay. Then we go to the third activity. So first we created interest. Second, we generated the skill of asking questions. The third activity is collecting information regarding the questions we posed. Students are asked to collect data about the question raised. They collect data from traditionally 2 or 3 years ago, and even today, most people collect data from internet, library, meeting elder people, field visiting archives, etc. So in order to that, we have to go outside the classroom to the community and repositories. This is very important. Okay, students cannot find out answers directly in the text and information seen or heard, or for example, transportation changed over time, how floors covering have changed over time, and the students, when we raise these questions, if there is habit of going to the library and collecting information, nobody see answers to these issues. He generally you can see coming back of the student by telling us there is no evidence for that in that text. Okay, how can we find answers to that? We have to travel beyond the classroom, ask elders what was happening regarding the floor management of houses. What materials did we use to make our floors in houses 100 years ago? And why the transformation has taken place? Okay, students need training to using reference books and source materials. In order to have better collection of data, a teacher has to teach how to collect sources, in the modern way by traveling beyond conventional lines. Not just library, not just internet. You have to go to the village and ask people and tell students, visit houses and ask elders how this did practice in older days, and so that a variety of answers will come out because of this inquiry. A scientific inquiry take place because of this activity. Then when we go outside the classroom to collect information, we collect objects for display from the community is an important activity. This is very important. Tell students to bring certain objects connected with a problem and conduct an exhibition. For example, we have a good history associated with food practice. We have a good history associated with domestic articles, domestic equipments, domestic medicine, our dress pattern, house construction, etc. so that conduct an exhibition. Exhibition an interesting activity which generates history interest among students. So very simply we can conduct exhibitions to generate interest. Exhibition of clothes, appliances, money, utensils, domestic tools, etc. This makes a student capable of learning new information. Especially with the emergence of micro families, most students are departed, delinked from the history of the village, history of the family. So how can we create interest among such students coming from micro families? Conduct exhibitions and group activities. It also transforms his psychological isolation, loneliness, so that he become broad-minded and also become service-minded. That is also an important outcome of history teaching. Becomes part of when these normal things become part of his study and research, history learning become very, very interesting. Student may also require training in such conduct of exhibitions. Then oral history is also very important. Tell students to interview elder people and see how that man saw the world around him, because he saw the world around him in a different way. We have to record that way in which a person saw the world around him, because every person is qualified to speak about his sense of history. In order to see that voice, isolated voice, unique voice, we have to promote oral history. That is also an important tool to make our history teaching very interesting. See a photograph. I, with my MPhil research scholar, now went to so many elders to collect their information about a particular issue, so that we were able to collect lot of information which is not available in books available to us. This connects our research problem connected to the life around us, the village in which we are living, the community in which we are living. So oral history is very important to make history known to you, related to your life, related to the community, and also beneficial to the community. Most of the research theses produced by different universities are not beneficial to the community in which we are living. So in order to make it beneficial, in order to make it useful to the community, and in today and tomorrow, connect our life with the ordinary people around us. Then we go to the next zone, how to reach conclusions. So when we reach conclusions, we have to become truthful to evidences. Evidences are very important, because evidences are the true objects that tell the truth. So it is in the side of interpretation we move away from evidences, but evidences are the basis. It is in this backdrop we produce research conclusions. Even small students can do small researches by collecting evidences, and elder people, higher class students can do good research by collecting evidences. This forms the foundation of the entire work, and in a democratic way, and which creates democratic citizenship. If you watch history students, if you watch good history students, he is more humane and socially committed. But science students are not in that manner. They grows in a different way. Why this speciality in history students and social science students? It is because of these kinds of activity they are engaged with. They becomes broad-minded and now sympathetic to the fellow beings. So in order to create such a democratic citizenship, history teaching is to be very interesting. It to be transformed into an interesting act. Students learn that knowledge is different from faith, blind opinion. See, by studying evidences, by focusing evidences, we teach students that we are not depending upon blind opinion and faith. We depend upon evidences, true evidences, so that we can guard the society from black magic, bad practices, communalism, and dictatorialism. History students have greater responsibility. A teacher must understand this fact, because he is giving way to the future of the country, protection of the democratic values of the country through the students sitting in front of him. So in order to inspire him in the democratic way, in order to instill him democratic virtues and values, we have to train them in this way, so that quality emerges in his mind. History is based upon evidences. Conclusions which are not based upon evidences have no place in history. Learners have to synthesize information collected from various sources and reaching in conclusions. Teachers have an important role in teaching students analytic skills or analytic process, analytic work connected with the data he collected. Then, beyond evidence, one important core thing in history teaching is time and chronology. How students can be made aware of time and chronology. Traditional history teaching students told students to memorize dates and time charts. See, we had the practice of keeping time charts. We write certain words and equivalent dates and tell students to memorize it. But today there are newer practices, better practices to make students time oriented, time conscious. How can we do this? Now, it was because of this conventional activity, history was disliked by many students. Understanding of time is very important in the understanding of history. History and time is related like spelling and writing. Time in history is important like historical evidence, interpretation and significance. Historical understanding is no more complete when we understand when did it happen. Very important. When did it happen? Chronology and time is very important. Otherwise, history becomes useless. So you have to teach students how to become time-oriented and chronological in sense. See, for which we use timelines. Okay, what is the remedy for this issue? Conventional times which tell the dates of wars and politics used in the traditional classroom, but they are not serving the purpose. Memorizing was the most difficult thing for the student. So many students abandon history in their higher classes because of the time problem, memory. Okay, how can we solve this issue? Use visual artifact or image timeline. See, today we have video clips telling you the time of a particular society. Okay, history of that society in which time is critical, is very strategically placed. So such image timelines, artifact timelines will help you to escape students, to save students from memorizing things. Okay, it naturally deposits it's in his mind, the concept of time. Help students to match dates with what already they knew. If students are constantly exposed to the connection between dates and visual images and understand the importance of time and chronology, history becomes very interesting and very simple. Broad periods can be seen as close to now, long age, really long ago, based upon the existent knowledge. Students have to consider past connected to them through constant changes occurred. Display of images, artifacts help students to understand how material culture involves. So modern timelines are very important in the management of time and chronology. You might have heard about time and chronology are the eyes of a historian. Very important. So evidence is the most important thing. Along with that, equally important is time and chronology. When we make a mistake in time, the whole system becomes wrong. Okay, the thesis becomes entirely wrong when we miss time and chronology. Okay. See, we have learned how to create interest. We have learned how to generate questions. Then collecting information. Then reaching conclusion, time, evidence, and also through analysis, we reach conclusions. So today in classrooms, even though these things are not part of your history textbook, subjects, you can see different topics connected with the daily life of the people are available to us. Attitude towards women, minorities, childhood, the poor, war, family, religion, labor, environment around us. All these things are under transformation today. And it was so in the past also. Why this transformation take place? How this transformation take place? The world is not constant. It is transforming day by day. So we have to find out how this transformation operates. How can we transform this transformation for the betterment of human life? How can we solve issues that is connected with the daily life today? So use different topics to as assignments and research questions to students so that our history classroom becomes very important. See, in this slide, I am going to show you a particular video, which suppose we are teaching Hitler and Second World War. All of you are aware that Hitler was a very undemocratic and dictatorial man. And we teach him through textbook. We teach him through the lecture of a teacher. Let us see this small video which tell you what was Hitler, how he was able to influence a larger audience. And after the First World War, as all of you are aware, in 1918, Germany had become a desert. Even their railway tracks were taken away by victorious powers like France and Britain. It had become a real desert by 1918-1920. But if you learn the history of Germany, in 1931, Germany had become again a superpower within 10 years. How did this happen? Who converted Germany into a first grade developed nation by 10 to 15 years? And how did, in the midst of this development, a dictator emerge? What was the personal skill and power of Hitler? Let us see this small video, which speaks to you what Hitler was. Okay, let us see the video. Hitler that we know is a comedian as it was represented by Charlie Chaplin. But the real Hitler was totally different. It was the imperial powers that wanted to create a comedian image of Hitler in the future world. That is why Charlie Chaplin acted the role of Hitler. But actual Hitler was totally different. It was this Hitler that transformed Germany from a defeated nation to a number one nation in the world by 1939. And in the midst of that transformation, he became a dictator and he became responsible for the murder of large number of people through concentration camps. When we show this video in the classroom, you can you will be in a position to communicate lot of things without our speech, without our words to students. That will tell you another story of Germany under Hitler. Most of the textbooks written by later period are written by victorious powers. There is a story of Germany written by the Germans, but that is not given, that has not earned significance today. So there is another side of the story. In order to understand this complicated issue, you can bring these kinds of videos into the classroom. Take videos by using your mobile phone and having focus upon history discipline and also problems debated in the classroom, and preserve it and make use of it in the history classroom. And in the end of my lecture, I am going to conclude. I am showing you another important book which may help you to transform your class. This is Doing History. It is a second edition book available to us, investigating with children in elementary and middle schools. Actually, this is a book designed to turn our history classroom in schools and secondary classrooms interesting by bringing what I said in the first slide, doing research. So doing interesting research is an important activity to a history teacher and a history student. to make our classroom interesting today. Thank you very much.
Sir,
Yeah.
you can ask your question through chat box.
Oh, okay, right.
Sir, you can answer based on the chat box, sir. Kindly post your queries in the chat box. Thanks, sir. Sir, everyone saying thank you only, sir. No.
Okay, right.
Yes, everyone
So
saying.
I am ready to answer questions.
Okay.
According to my ability. Okay, right. I can give you my email ID or my phone number. They can communicate with me through WhatsApp and email. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
I shall send it through to your WhatsApp.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. We'll post. Sir.
Anyway, I am really thankful to all for the patient listening, and most importantly, I am thankful to Shangari teacher for giving me this chance.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
We history teachers are social engineers. Responsibility to refine the students, intern the society.
Yeah, right.
Occasion you have presented nicely, elaborately. So automatically we will have a nice classroom.
Okay.
Started.
Yeah, thank you,
I hope
teacher.
that the teacher participants would have benefited from the presentation, nice presentation, elaborate presentation. I am and our team is ever thankful to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, they can develop my limited knowledge by reading the books I prescribed, teacher.
Okay, sir. Very interesting, very innovative, very special, sir.
Thank you, teacher.
Dear participants, the next session will be by 3 p.m. today. The second session will be.
Okay, right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, right.